So tonight on our webinar, I got to interview and chat with my good friend Travis Eubanks about construction costs. Mainly, we were focusing on the first R in the BRRRR acronym, which stands for renovate. So we looked at costs, we looked at things to avoid. We broke things apart in a few different categories, from minor to moderate to major renovations. You're going to hopefully benefit from this episode if you're doing any kind of renovations and investing. One thing that's really interesting is Travis and his wife, Cody, they actually got their start on HGTV's Property Virgins. That's when they bought their very first house here in Savannah. And so I just like to joke with him that you went from Property Virgin to Property Pro, and you're just killing it. So hopefully you get something from this episode as we dove into the construction world of real estate investing.
So Josh and I have known each other for about, 12 years now, roughly, probably.
Yeah.
My wife and I actually, in our first home we bought in 2015, the live-in flip, didn't really realize it at the time. We're just sort of trying to fix an older home. And Josh approached us about 2 years into the process. Like, hey, you guys think about selling your house? And long story short, we've done 4 flips now, and had some good success along the way. I work full-time in finance. So I work currently for a sod and seed company, and I do FP&A, which is financial planning analysis. So a lot of budgeting, forecasting, cost analysis, things along those lines. So that's my day-to-day job. And then on the side, I do some project management for Josh and a couple of his partners and a couple of other investors, just managing a couple of their projects. I'm not a contractor, don't have a contractor's license. I more or less assist with some scheduling, some budgeting help here and there, and making sure we're getting a good job done in the right budget. So yeah, that's sort of my short narrative. We've just finished flipping a house on Isle of Hope. This actually was gonna be our first true flip, and we just could not let go of it. We were living in Warner Robins. We had moved away for a year from Savannah, and it was a great location, great equity, and we just didn't want to leave the house. So we decided to move in and just moved back to Savannah about 2 months ago. So trying to get settled here and do some other stuff. So
Yeah. And I would say, well, first off, I have to say, Travis and his wife, when they bought their first house, they were actually featured on HGTV's Property Virgins. So you can go back and watch that episode, which is so fun because I love joking and saying that they went from being virgins to being a little unfaithful to all these houses they keep flipping and selling. So but no, like it's actually really cool that they, you think about that picture, they went from not knowing anything, and now honestly, like they're rock stars, like they're killing it, and just could not be more proud of you guys.
One thing there, Josh, let me add this.
Yeah,
we actually filmed, I don't know if I told you this, we actually filmed the first episode on Isle of Hope because it was our dream location.
Yeah,
we just couldn't afford it.
Yeah, and now you're there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, now you're there. That's awesome. All right, so Travis mentioned that he's started doing a few of our projects. One thing I have discovered about myself is that I'm really, really bad at project management. So it just so happens we do construction and renovating houses, but if it was anything else, I would still just be really bad at it if it was a matter of moving the ball from A to Z. And so I have found that my desires and gifts lie in the front end of a construction process, as far as discerning, is this property possible to renovate, and kind of getting the things going. But once it's going, it is almost assuredly gonna just come to some roadblocks, and I just I get bored, honestly. So we had a project. It was really the biggest project we've done to date in Savannah, Midtown, and we kind of got stuck in it. It just was out of sight, out of mind for us. We had bought 5 properties at once last year, and for us, this is, I always say this is like a lifestyle business. Like if it gets overwhelming, then I just take a step back. I'm like, whether or not I put food on the table, I'm not flipping houses, so I don't need the income right now. But that can be bad if you keep that mindset too long, because then you go from having a really good deal and turning it into a bad deal if it starts costing you too much money. So we ended up buying these several properties at once, and we just got a little overwhelmed. And so long story short, we brought Travis in. It's like, come help me. We're drowning. I need you to help recover this ship. So His wife, Cody, has got a really good design eye, and Travis is just really good at putting those dominoes in place where they fall. And honestly, like Travis, you could, you know, your work probably is a little bit of project management in and of itself, like your 9-to-5 job. So stepping into the real estate world, it was just a matter of kind of, well, I just got to learn these things. And if I'm good at this, I can move forward. So, so we brought Travis in on this project, and I'm going to use that in this video as we talk a little bit about construction costs. Travis has got some pretty cool spreadsheets that he's designed and made for him and his wife. I think he's going to be really generous and share those with us, and send over some links so you guys can take those and use those. But this is kind of going to be fun because Travis has never seen what our property on Reynolds Street looked like before we started renovating it. So I'm going to play this video of a walkthrough and of what this place looked like before. And I'm going to narrate. I don't like to hear myself talk. So this is 2015 Reynolds. This is the day we closed on it. And this is what it looked like before. So it's got all, I mean, you know, in this video, you won't see me doing it because this wasn't the video I walked through the very first time, but normally I'm jumping up and down on the floors. I'm seeing how solid the subfloors are, but this place is just garbage. I mean, everything in this place needed to be demoed. The floor was garbage. Everything was garbage. This whole area back here was an addition. It used to be like a porch, and then they closed it in. And that's just a small bedroom. And then this is the one bedroom. We're going to walk down the hall, and then there's another bedroom at the end of the hall. And in between is this bathroom, which you can't see a lot of, but it just had red tile. Travis, that's the first time you've seen that.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
And then there was a half bath right here in this room. So now, and this is the backyard. I got to show you the backyard. This is a picture of the backyard. So the backyard was just awful. It was just trashed. And in fact, underneath, can you see my cursor moving?
Yeah.
So underneath all of that was about 5 or 6 inches of rugs. I had a guy come and demo this backyard for me and clean it all up. And he was like pulling out rugs for days. It was crazy, but that's what they were parking on. So I'm going to just show you a little bit of when it was kind of destroyed during the demo phase. So one of the things that made the demo really expensive on this is us opening up those walls in that main room, was there was plaster on the walls, and then behind the plaster was all of these wood slats, just like that. And it was just, all of these things were coming off in just pieces. So it took, I would say, I think it took like 8 or 9 days for the demo for our 3-man crew. So it ended up getting pretty pricey, and we'll talk about a little bit of that. So, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Hey Josh,
Yeah.
really quick.
Yeah.
Did they know that it was plaster and lathe before they started banging down the walls? Did they quote you on that?
Well, okay, so great question. So we knew that there was plaster on the walls. We didn't know if it was that, or we didn't know if it was the metal behind it. You know, sometimes they have the metal. I have another property that has metal. Now they knew that, but the ceiling was actually drywall. So we had thought that the ceiling was drywall, and it wasn't. So it had a layer of drywall, then another layer of plaster, and then that lathe. So, and this was an interesting thing because we started off, and this was before we brought Travis on, but I think the quote started at around $2,800 to $3,000 for the demo. But they ended up I think we ended up paying about $4,800. So we ended up going about $1,800 over demo budget. But these were guys that we really valued their character. They weren't guys that are going to rob you and take advantage of you. And so when you have that kind of relationship, when they come back to you and say, guys, this was way more than what we expected, you know, sometimes you just take the L, you just lose on that, and you just got to try to make it up somewhere else, because those kind of trade partners are super valuable. And you know, if you find yourself nickel and diming your trade partners, they're not going to want, you're the customer, so they're not going to want to work for you, just like you wouldn't if you had some customer harassing you all the time. So all right, Travis. All right, so
All right,
that was the first time you saw that.
Yeah.
So you came in a little bit later in the process, but I wanna just start there, and let's talk a little bit about demo. That was a great question Dan asked. Let's talk about demo and maybe just initial design. You know, you saw me walking through the property, but that's a big part of like when you're estimating your budget is like, what are you going to do with the space?
Right.
Right? Are we going to add a bathroom? Because that the space started off as a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and then there was this small room in the back on the back porch. Is it essentially what was there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that layout looks completely crazy. It looks totally different when I took over. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, when you go into a house, I mean, looking at options to optimize the space and make space purposeful. So, you know, we just purchased this house, and I'll just give an example of the house we just flipped. Basically, it was a converted garage that was probably a third of the square foot of the house, and nothing was being done with it. And it's like, okay, how do we then make that purposeful? How do we then add value by changing that space? And that's when you have to start looking at the cost benefit there. Does it make sense for me to spend the money to add another bedroom and bathroom? And so we brought, you know, purchased a 3.2. Now we have a 4.3. So that's the kind of thinking you want to have when you go into a space is what can I get? What can I do with the floor plan, the space that I have in here, and how can I optimize it to get more value out of it? Sometimes you're going to buy a property and it's just going to be cosmetic. You can't even do that. But there are ways that you can be creative to take even a tiny space. For instance, the house that we currently have there was an office in the front of the house. We changed it into a foyer so that we could then add a master suite on the back half of the house, relocated the front door. Just things like that. You have to be creative, think outside the box, look for other solutions. I think a lot of times we can get a little overwhelmed and just think, well, that I walk into it and that's what I have to work with, and there's nothing else I can do with it. You know, get a piece of paper. That's what I do. Get a piece of paper, do a rough sketch of what the layout is, and then start thinking, how can we do this? And you're going to do it 100 times over, and finally you'll come up with something that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, on the demo side, I would say be very specific about what you want removed and what you do not want removed. I've been on both sides of that coin where we did one flip where I wanted to keep, it was an older home that had some nice fixtures and unique things within it, old like bathroom heaters that had really cool appeal to them that I wanted to keep in there. Just small things like that that really kept the house within its period of time. And they got thrown away and trashed. And you know, I even told the guy, hey, don't throw this away. But it's a matter of just being very adamant, and maybe even showing up while they're there demoing to make sure things don't get thrown away that you want to keep. And on the other side, you know, Josh and I see this often. You know, they go and demo and they leave a light fixture hanging somewhere for some reason.
Yeah,
like that's not a job done. So technically, you know, on both sides of that, you want to make sure you're very clear and thorough on the demo side of things. You know, as far as what you want done, what you do not want done. Because you know, either way can be a little upsetting. So
yeah, absolutely. And I'll put my realtor hat on for a second. So, you know, him being in his personal house on Isle of Hope, he took that house from a 3.2. Was it 3.2?
Yeah, 3.2.
Yeah, so he took it from a 3.2 to a 4.3, and that was a really good value add because he's in a place where homes are selling for in the 600s and more, and so getting that extra square footage was really important. This example of Reynolds that we're looking at, it was technically a 2.1.5. I could have went the path and made it a 2.2, but I created that third bedroom, even though it probably in downtown Savannah, a 2.2 versus a 3.2 in this particular area didn't drive the price up drastically. I knew that it could at least you know, and especially post-COVID, differentiate that property. Even if it was a small family living there, having a space for an office or something would bring value, even if it didn't bring this huge monetary value. And plus, I wasn't having to do much. All I had to do was put a window in there, and I was already doing sheetrock. I was already doing flooring, so it just made sense. The other thing that caught my eye on that particular, and I can pull it back up, I guess, is in between those bedrooms, I basically just measured the space. You know, the thing to know is the minimum square footage you want for a bathroom is going to be like an 8 by 5. So, you know, roughly, what is that? 40 square feet. And so, you know, when I measured that space, I knew, I was like, I could easily fit 2 bathrooms in here. So that was probably more of an increase to go from a 1.5 bath to 2 full baths. And not only that, but I'm not having to move my plumbing around a whole lot. Your plumbing's already there. So just trying to think about those kind of things is going to help you on your cost as well. All right. Let's you want to look at your spreadsheet and start maybe diving into that a little bit and thinking through some of this, or do you want to stay on Reynolds? And
Yeah, that's cool. I can do that.
I'm going to let you share your screen. Let me make it where you can
Okay.
do that.
All right.
So Cody, Travis's wife, Cody, she without, you know, getting into too much of their business, she basically goes around and she puts a lot of houses under contract for a guy. And she needs to go when she's going to see these things to have a really good understanding of construction. So Travis basically created this for her. So hopefully you can find some value in it.
So just a real quick, this is really just a really quick tool that, you know, I just put together for her to use. You walk into a house and really the thought is to break this thing up into 3 different categories. That's typically how I work. I like to take something big and then break it down into pieces, and that's really good, holds true for any costing, anything you're going to be costing. That's how you go about doing it. If you get a big quote from a contractor and it's got so many different things in there, it's okay, how did you get to that number? And there's got to be a formula there. There's got to be a way to work back into that number based on labor hours, labor costs, material costs, etc. Everything's got a cost assigned to it. Some people like to sell you on value, but at the end of the day, there is a true cost. And so that's really how I think about breaking things down and to put it into these groupings. You know, I walk into a house, okay, this is just a cosmetic quick flip. I want to get it knocked out and put some, you know, paint on the walls, change the floors, change light fixtures, add some light plumbing fixtures in there and get out of it and be done with it. That's what I call cosmetic. Moderate's going to be a little bit more destructive. You might tear down a couple walls, do a little bit of framing. You might have some roof replacement, things along those lines. And we'll look at the tabs separately. And then major is really when you get into a full throttle renovation. You know, you got structural issues, you need a roof, you need HVAC, you need electrical work, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's really 3 good categories to break your projects into. You may have a different way of framing that. That's just my personal way of keeping up with it. But cosmetic, I think, you know, I don't have anything in it for demo right now, but anything cosmetic is going to be, you know, the quick and easy ones, or they should be the quick and easy ones. I'm very conservative for the most part when I budget. So I like to do a worst case scenario in most cases. And that's where you can get yourself in trouble if you go on, you know, what it was 2 years ago. That doesn't work. I think we all know that costs are through the roof. You know, materials, labor as well. Labor is sticky too. That's one thing about labor. It doesn't go away. Material costs could come down, but labor is sticky. And you see that in really any industry right now. Everyone's wanting a pay increase. That's fixed costs that aren't going anywhere. You can't change someone's labor rate. Once they're getting that paycheck, that's what they're going to want. So I think to be here to stick around for a while.
I want to say something about that. So,
yeah.
So obviously labor is a price, and it's going to be driven just by supply and demand, like any other price, right? Basic economics. But the thing that's interesting too is that you have to remember, like, what is skilled labor and what's not. So, like the demo, for example, we talked about this a little bit before we started filming this, and you know, it's so hard sometimes to quantify, but it's really not if you really stop and think about it. Like, if it's an unskilled labor just coming in and tearing stuff out, like put a hammer in my wife's hand and she can demo, right? And to me, if you break it down the daily, like, well, what should I be paying this per day? So, you know, you got a 2-man crew and you're paying them $200 a day each, $400 a day. You know, just asking questions to your contractors. Well, how many days do you think it's going to take you? They say 3, then great. You know, you can think that's probably going to be about $1,200, right? Because that's unskilled labor. So, you know, my broker always used to tell me, like, you know, when someone gives a really crazy outlandish quote, like, you're not doing brain surgery here, right? Like, this is construction. And so, but at the end of the day, we know we're in a climate right now that's, prices are going up. But honestly, there's an opportunity they're going to probably come back down a little bit too, as we see things level out and slow down a little bit.
Yep, that's a good point, Josh. Just really asking the right questions when you get a quote back. I think the timing aspect, how many people, how many days, and then you could go back and work that out. That's always a good way to negotiate. Get that information from them. Just be non-confrontational. Get that information after you get your first quote. Go back with a piece of paper and pencil. Do some rough calculations. These guys are averaging $50 an hour. Then I had one guy quote me like $75 an hour to put trim in. Based on what he quoted, and I'm like, man, I should have never went to college. I'm in the wrong trade. So, you think about that, you can really break it down and start calculating, wow, this guy's charging me this amount of money per hour. That doesn't make sense, and then you can go back to the table and use data and use those things to really challenge people's thinking. And some people are going to just be like, whatever, that's what it is. But some people may work with you and then start. That's a way to really build up a good relationship with a I call it a vendor, but with a contractor. Once you know their terms, once you know what they charge roughly, it really takes away a lot of the guessing, and then you can start focusing on the projects. And you stop that back and forth, but that takes some time to get there. It takes some trust on both sides. But I think ask the questions up front. How many days, how many people, do some rough calculations, get an idea in your mind, and then go from there.
I should say too, like, this is basically you subbing out your own projects, your GC and your own projects. So you also just have to know, if you're going to hire a GC, you're losing that spread. I mean, that GC is going to make probably at least 30% spread a lot of times. And a lot of times it's valid, right? Like, they've got to manage the crew. It's a heavy lifting. Construction is probably the heavier lifting part of this whole endeavor of real estate investing. But to me, you can't really grow as an investor if you're always using a GC. It's okay. I would say it's okay to start off with that on your first couple of deals, but if you're going to continue to grow, it makes it so hard to find deals, because not only are you having to cover the spread of the GC, now you've got to cover your spread too to make money. And so I would just say that if you're going to hire a GC, obviously these prices are going to look a lot different, because you have to know that guy's the one finding and networking, and he's getting the volume pricing, right? So if he's the one getting the hustle and deals, then he can turn around and charge you retail pricing, and he's getting the volume pricing, and he's keeping the spread, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Couple of things on this, things that catch you out on, like, cosmetics. I don't even have them on here, but like plumbing fixtures, sink, shower. That's what you want to do. Like vanity lights, mirrors. I mean, you go look for a mirror, they're $100 each, probably minimum right now. You can go to like Home Goods, and they're still $100 per mirror. That's just a cost or an expense that you typically don't think about, that catch you out, and they add up pretty quickly. Cabinet hardware, all those little cosmetic finishes are easy to gloss over, but when you're building that budget out, be thinking about those things. The towel hooks in the bathrooms, just these small little things add up over time. You can end up spending $1,000 on just those items, and you're not planning for it. You're going to be like, why is my budget so out of whack? And that's one thing that I think often can catch you out. When it comes to budgeting, I always say a budget's a plan. And then anything after a budget is then forecasting or adjusting for that plan. So I typically like to hold my budget, and then anything that I have to change, and this is more just terminology and semantics of how I like to think about it, is anything that changes after that becomes more of a forecast and why things are changing. So if you're doing this for someone, like for instance, I do this for Josh and his partners, and I know we have a risk to budget, I'm gonna say, hey guys, like, I've looked around everywhere. We're gonna have to think about this different. We're gonna have a little bit extra cost in this area, and it may change the overall forecast. But we're thinking our budget's still 100,000, but we're gonna think we're gonna be at 110,000 now because of these particular changes. at least we know that. And being upfront with that, even with yourself, sometimes we can fool ourselves and say, well, I will deal with that. It's not going to be that big a deal. Put it on the paper and be conservative at the end of the day. Don't think that sometimes that $2,000 is going to go away. If you know it's a problem, put it on the budget list. Even if you don't want to deal with it, put it on there, put some money assigned to it. That way, you can cover yourself. And I always do a little contingency. I typically do like a 10% just for covering extra expenses that may arise. But as far as this is concerned, cosmetic walk-in, hey, this is what needs to be done roughly. It's tied to square footage. You could come in here and change your square footage and it'll populate some of these things here. You can even add items in here, like I was just talking about. Stepping into moderate, this is when you get into like bathroom renovations. 5 and 8 is typically what I do for a small and a large. If you look at Reynolds bathrooms, I think we're right in that ballpark on both of those bathrooms, Josh.
Yeah.
And that's just over time, that's something I've just gotten used to seeing myself spend in the bathroom. And I'm not talking a massive bathroom. When I mean large, it's probably, I think that what's the one in Reynolds, that master ensuite,
It's probably a 10 by 10 with the closet.
That one's right around $7,000, I think.
Yeah.
With everything. And that's tile, floor, tile, shower, toilets, vanities, closet system, etc. So
labor and materials?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's good to know. Like just knowing, like walking into a 5 by 8 bathroom, if I wanted to gut it and redo it, I'm looking at $5,000.
Yep. If you start cutting concrete, that may add a little bit to cost you to your plumbing. This was a crawl space, fortunately, but we're doing one right now, and we've done some concrete cutting. I think it was like $2,000 to get it to where it needed to be roughed in. So
yeah, and a little note, like I know you've got this spreadsheet. This is really a rule of thumb, right? So if you've got an 800 square foot house and you've got a 1,500 square foot house, it's not necessarily going to stay the same price per square feet, because you've still got people and bodies that have to come in the house. You get a little bit of efficiency the bigger the house, in terms of like, if I'm doing drywall for a 2,000 square foot house versus a 600 square foot house, that they still got to show up, they got to get materials. But once they're rocking and rolling and that tub of mud is open, like they're going with it, right? So you're going to get some cost savings as you get bigger, just like you would expect. So
yep. Cabinets, I would say cabinets is one of the largest expenses you're going to see. Cabinets, windows, HVAC, but cabinets, for instance, there's some great options. That's probably even a high for moderate. That's probably even a high quote there. You could do the Lowe's option. There's also RTA cabinets. My wife and I have done that a few times and assembled them ourselves. A little time consuming, but it's some sweat equity. And it's a cool little project to put them together, all plywood. So just throw that out there. There's some great providers that you can get those cabinets from and not have to do custom. A lot of people hear cabinets and they think immediately I got to go to a custom cabinet builder or something. RTAs are a great option as well.
What does RTA stand for, Travis?
Oh yeah, ready to assemble.
Yeah, there you go.
Meaning it's ready for you to have a drill, some wood glue, and some time. But no, they're a lot of fun. I've done it a couple of times.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What about IKEA?
IKEA, I love IKEA.
It's kind of fun to walk through. Are they good cabinets or are they crap?
All right, I have a comment on that. So personally, like IKEA has a few things that I would probably buy, but for me and my investing philosophy, I'm always thinking long-term. And also just the logistics, like, your time is valuable too. So all these numbers that we're putting in here, if you're going to be the one assembling these cabinets, you spend a whole day or whatever, like you have to factor that in. Like, so I used to go to IKEA to buy all kinds of things. I've just realized, like, gosh, every time I go there, it's a 10-hour day. And then I have to come home and assemble everything. It's like, it's just not worth it. I can get these things delivered, RTA cabinets delivered, and it's just way better. So I would say no to the IKEA. Maybe on specialty things.
Great closet systems.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, is that what that came from Reynolds?
Yeah, that's what we have in our house.
Yeah.
All right.
For RTA, do they sell those? Those are specifically sold somewhere, or are they just like Home Depot, Lowe's, or wherever?
I can send you a link to the guy we use. And they typically will do the layout for you and everything. You send them the dimensions.
Oh, really? Okay.
They'll do the kitchen layout, visual 3D model, so you can see it, and then as well provide the cabinets. That's all part of the service.
Cool.
And typically, like all the trim work will come with them too, like the base molding, crown molding, everything will go with that full package.
I have on my website, I have a vendor page that I have not updated in quite some time. I'm going to work with Travis in the coming week and update that so that you guys have that. You go to my website, rehustler.com, and you click on this vendor page, and we'll have all of the vendors like separated by category that you can call, and that should be a super helpful resource for you. So I'll update the cabinet sources we've used.
All right. One thing I didn't mention, age of house is important when you go into a house. How old is this home? Look into that and be aware of that. So that gets into the electrical and the plumbing. Really the electrical, do I need to really gut everything that's in there and redo all the wiring? This is just a minor one here where you maybe adding some switches, outlets, running some new wire to new locations and hanging new fixtures and things like that. But do I really need to go in there, new panel, new metering, everything? And I think that's going to be dependent on the age of the home and the condition of the home. So
yeah,
always good to know how old the home is when you walk in there.
Can I ask a question about that? And Josh, I want to know the year that house was built, the one that you just showed us, because I have concerns about plumbing. I know that the piping they used, 100 years ago, it's prone to rust and clogs and all of that. So are there lessons to be learned about, what year is safe and what years are not?
So a rule of thumb that we use a lot is the 1980 mark for plumbing. And electrical, you'll usually see, and of course that varies, but typically if you're buying something built after 1980, you're probably not going to have to update your plumbing. You're probably not going to have to update your electrical. There was some weird stuff, excuse me, that happened in the 90s and early 2000s with some Chinese copper. So you'll see a lot of houses built in probably the mid 90s to early 2000s in this area. They had these I think it was like polybutylene or something. There was something going on with the copper. And so you'll see a ton of slab leaks happen. There's a few communities in Effingham that just constantly have to have their whole house repexed for new plumbing because of that. But I would say normally anything after 1980, you're probably not going to get into the major electrical plumbing. That house that I showed you, Travis, do you know, it was built sometime between 1920 and 1945, I think.
Yeah, I never looked.
I can't remember, to be honest with you. We redid everything. And the interesting thing about plumbing is getting a water source to the location is easy. It's getting the water away, the sewage away is the part that can get expensive. So for example, like to repex an entire house might cost you $1,500 to $2,000. But if you wanted to come in and cut up slab or even with a crawl space redo plumbing, like you could get into some pretty pricing stuff and that could get scary. You're talking about old cast iron or even a lot of houses in Savannah, they'll have the old clay pipe going out to the street. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen where that's been collapsed, tree roots growing through it. And that's a $3,000 item just to get all that redone, so. One thing I would tell you, if you're buying a place from a realtor standpoint and you have suspicions if it's an older house, you can pay to have a plumber come out and run a camera, run some things. They can tell you a lot from that kind of stuff. It might cost you $300 or $400, but if it saves you, $4 or $5 grand on the back end, it can really be worth it. So there are some ways to mitigate this if you're not sure. So
we can keep on, Josh, with this.
Yeah, moving on to
Okay.
major.
All right, so major, so cosmetic, I would say you're going to be anywhere from the $25,000 to $35,000 range. I call it really 30, 50, and 80 roughly for major. So that for the splits there. So cosmetic 30, moderate 50, major 80 and above. Windows, almost every time you're going to replace a window, it's going to be in the 400 to 450 range. That's just almost a standard across the board. You're going to pay $200 for the install and at least $200 for a window. So that's just a good budget number always holding there, maybe more depending on the size of windows in your home. So if you're ever putting the budget together, you're probably safe with 450 to 500 for a window that you're going to replace. That's just what we've seen. I'd love for it to be cheaper than that, but we haven't had anyone yet quote us less than $200 to install a window. So,
and I want to speak about windows, because windows are a thing that there's so much knowledge, that you come to with this, and a lot of times this is learned from mistakes, right? Like, let's say you're doing a major renovation like this, like Reynolds, like what we did, we were replacing all of the exterior. We ended up doing vinyl siding. I wasn't excited about that, but we needed to do that for budget reasons. But because it wasn't brick, and because we weren't stuck with where our windows were and window layout, we weren't stuck with having to buy certain sized windows. That gave us a lot of freedom to keep our budget low for window costs, because we could go off the shelf and go buy these. Versus, I have this really old cool house in Guyton, this old Tudor built in 1945, all brick. I had to specially order these windows, and for 23 windows, it was 10 grand. So, obviously that's a substantial cost that if I was doing that house, if it wasn't brick and we were redoing the siding, I probably could have done that for half the cost at least, and the cost of windows. And that's just the cost of the windows. So knowing your exterior, what that's made of, is gonna help you in determining, like, how cheap or how expensive these windows need to be in your budget.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for everybody? All right. So what are some of the other big things that you see that you think would kind of differentiate this major category from moderate?
Anything foundational. I have some cost here, and I was going to say, I have this note here. There's tons of resources on the internet. So, this is just a cost. This thing here is just a cost analysis online that you could pull up, and just so you have that in your back pocket, you sort of know. And doing some research online is just very important, I think, in learning this. You're going to learn through experience and also research. And there's a ton of data out there to when you start researching online. So, like foundation issues, is there a structural foundation issue? If it's a crawl space, those are a little bit easier to fix. If it's a slab, then you might have some major, Josh and I went into a house, I think it was earlier this year, that had some serious slab issues.
Oh, yeah.
Walking up a hill almost. And like that was an immediate no-go, brick shifting on the outside, look for those things. If you're at a brick home, it's on slab, and there's brick, disconnected from one another, you probably have some foundation issues going on. And that's where, you're going to get into some money pretty quickly there. But yeah, I think foundation issues, roofing, windows, major electrical, major plumbing, that's really, gutting all of that. That's where you're going to really spend a lot of your money at. Also, something that I've experienced recently, I feel like tile and tile labor has become, and I sort of roll that into my bathroom guesstimates here, but when I break it down in detail, tile and tile labor is a large portion of that bathroom cost. And you want to have a good tile guy. I will say that it's not worth cutting corners on a tile installer. There's a reasonable price for tile, and there's also an unreasonable price, but you don't want to cut corners. You need to make sure you get pictures and references from your tile contractor. I would recommend that more. Probably that and electrical and plumbing are probably the three most important. Get references, get pictures, go to some other jobs they've done. Anything you can to make sure this guy knows what it is. Tile is permanent. You can tear it down, but it's in there. It's in there. And the worst looking thing is a shower with, tile that's jagged, Schluter edge that's messed up. So don't cheap yourself. Don't go too cheap on tile, on tile labor, but also just be reasonable about it. Be thorough with, you know, when you're talking through you want installed, how you want it installed, be very specific. I have some good examples I'm in right now of not being specific enough. So I just recommend that more than anything. Make sure that guy knows what he's doing. Make sure he knows how to do a shower bed. A lot of these guys say they know how to do a mortar bed. If a mortar bed isn't done right and you're renting a property out, you're going to have issues in 5 to 10 years of floor leaking, damage, something happening.
Yeah.
So I can't stress that enough. I'll stop, but I can't stress that enough.
All right, so I want to talk a minute about being specific, because if there's one thing I would tell you with any contractor or subcontractor, like, be specific and have it in writing is really important. So don't let me lose that thought. The other thing I want to say, especially around something like tile, is that you are the customer, and just like any business, you know, if I own a business, not every customer is going to be my ideal customer. So the tile person, and I've got guys that are good, but they're expensive. They need to be out at the landings, and for us that are local, you know, they need to be out in those ritzy places. They're going into people's homes, they're putting down drop cloths, they're being meticulous, and they're charging a premium because they're giving these people service, right? But we're investors. That's not what we want. We want really good quality work, but you're not having to put down drop cloths and make sure, you know, like, this is a different environment. And so you have to find that balance. And that's not just for tile, that's for all of this. And that really leads to networking, right? Like, how do we network to find contractors? And I can tell you, like, I find them pulling up at the gas station. I see they've got just a thing slapped on their side of their truck and their pants are dirty. I'm like, I'm going to get that guy's phone number. You know, I may never call him, but I'm going to go introduce myself and get his phone number. And Travis, you probably have a ton of stories like that. And so, and word of mouth, like, you know, Caitlin is on this call with her husband. Like, she called me recently, and so, like, I'm going to share, you know, these contractors. That's another reason why I have my Real Estate Hustler page for my vendor contractors. Is to me, like, I want to give these good guys business. I don't think from a scarcity mindset of like, oh gosh, if they go get busy painting someone else's house, they're not going to have time for mine. In fact, it's been the exact opposite. The guys that I share their contact all the time, they give me the best pricing. Like, sometimes, like, I had this happen with my flooring guy recently. He charged me like this ridiculous amount. He went and picked up carpet from Richmond Hill, drove all the way back to Effingham, and only charged me $220 to install it. And I was like, bro, you were charging me way too little. So I ended up adding like another $180 to the bill just to pay him, you know? But I know he was doing that because he's constantly thanking me for sending him business. So you take care of these guys. Like, it's even from the negotiating standpoint, if somebody comes to you, they've got good reviews or they've come highly recommended, and let's say they're a little high on a cost. If it's the first job you're doing with them, don't beat them up. You got to build a relationship. But on job 2 or 3, you get to say, hey, you know, on the first job, you were kind of a little high. On this one, I feel like you're a little high again. I need you to be here. They're going to be a lot more willing to work with you on their labor if you can build that rapport and that relationship. So I don't mean to beat a dead horse with that, but networking is important. You always have to be networking for new contractors, because your drywall guy today is not going to be your drywall guy tomorrow. You know, my Francisco, that was my drywall guy 2 years ago, I can't get him on the phone today, you know? And Travis will tell you, it's a constantly revolving door in construction. Unfortunately, the good guys move on to be working at the landings and places like that, and they become unaffordable. The really bad guys get out the business, and there's a constant influx of new people that are good, but they haven't got their bearings together yet or their organization together. And those are the people you've got to constantly be networking and recruiting to be on your team. So it is a constant hustle, unfortunately, like from the contractor standpoint, but it's just like hustling to find the deals. Like, it's just part of this business. You just have to be after it. So real quick, I want to talk about being specific, because I've been burned so many times by that, Travis. And then I want to just revisit Reynolds, where we're at. We're almost done with that. And let's take a look at some videos of that.
Cool.
And then take some questions.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, anytime you're quoting anyone, ask ask again and confirm, and get it in writing too. When they quote you something, have them quote specifically what you've asked for and agreed to do. You know, you may expect something and think you have it communicated well, and you may get something totally different. Have a great example of this recently. We have a fence that was being put up, and you know, we asked for a horizontal laid fence, and you know, with some specific details on how we wanted it laid, and we came and it was the crookedest fence we've ever saw. So I mean,
you have pictures of that? I might have pictures of that in a minute.
Yeah,
We'll
little skill set issue, but also a little communication issue, and not being, you know, specific enough. And you know, you're gonna know when a guy understands you. But ask them questions. Tell me what you're understanding. You know, do you have any concerns with doing that? Do you have any other thoughts? These guys are the experts. You know, that's one thing about, you know, using these contractors. And I used to be in supply chain. I thought this way as well. You know, don't do the work that they could be doing themselves. They are the ones that we're relying upon to provide a service. And a lot of times these guys can be a little just not, I don't want to use the word lazy, that's probably too strong a word, but like they're passive. They don't want to really go the extra mile. But you can develop a guy and get him to start thinking, like, because sometimes they will be like, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. There's always a way to accomplish something, always a way to do something. It's just to find and to talk those people the right way to get them to think that in that way. And be, you know, again, be specific, like have it in writing. I think having it in writing covers you. You know, if you ever had to, let's say you had a massive contract with a contractor to do a full renovation and you're paying this guy $150,000, you know, and there's no writing, there's nothing in writing agreeing to that number or what he's going to do, his scope of work, you have nothing to fall back on but a conversation. Have that in writing, documented, you know, whatever you can. Be clear and upfront about what they expect from payment. You know, a lot of times people think that you're going to pay them the next day, you know, and pay in full or pay them in advance. You know, here's what I want to do on payment. What would you like to see in payment? And then you come to terms with payment. That's always a point of contention, but make sure you know you're clear on what his expectation is on payment and what your expectation is on payment. You know, splitting it 60-40. You know, electrical. Hey, I'm going to pay you 60% to get the wiring and everything installed, but I'm going to hold 40% back until we have everything finished out in this house. Be creative with that. That's protects you and also gives them some incentive to keep coming back as well. These guys they'll ghost on you.
So okay, so that's a good question, because that's a big fear for people. So especially if I'm working with a new contractor, a new vendor, new sub, new trade partner, whatever you want to call them, I usually won't pay them to go get materials and deposit or whatever. I'm usually going to pay for those things and have them delivered myself, or I'm going to go get them. Once I've built that relationship, then maybe like I just, you know, my HVAC guy, he's about to do install for me. I'm gladly cut him a check for $3,800 for the materials, you know. But if I just met him, I would say, no, let me go to your supply house and I'll pay them and have it delivered to the site, you know. So that's one way to protect yourself. Most of the time, like good contractors, they don't typically require you to pay them in advance for their labor. You're paying after. Actually, I don't think there's ever a situation where I'm going to pay someone in advance for their labor. And that 60-40 rule is a really good rule because you want to hold out enough to make sure they show up to finish. And you want to have enough there that if they don't show up to finish, you have enough to pay someone else to come complete the job and finish it. So if you only have $100 laying out there to come in and install all your rest of your fixtures or something, like you're never going to get that guy to show up if he's doesn't have the character to. So that's really important. I feel like we could do a whole separate, like the more we've done this, I'm like, I keep coming up with things. So maybe we do construction 2.0 at some point. I do want to take a look at Reynolds. I want to take a look at where we're at and just kind of let you guys see kind of, hold on a second. You can talk while I'm pulling this up if you need to, Travis.
No, I'm good.
All right. So these are a few things that as we were going through the project, I'll show this briefly. This was it kind of opened up. So you can see like we basically got this down to the studs, and there's benefit to this, like getting everything down to the studs, because you really get to see what's wrong. Obviously, it comes with the cost of having to put everything back, but you really do get to see what's wrong. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward to the videos I took recently. All right, so turn this off. So this is where we're at today. Or actually, we're past this now. Painting should be wrapped up tomorrow. We'll be able to pull all this paper off the floors, have hood vent and cabinet finished up, get backsplash done, appliances installed. And this is Reynolds. This is the same place, and it looks drastically different. I mean, it's just, it blows my mind when I walk into it. And I give Cody and Travis literally all the credit. Like, they picked out this tile design, which is funny because this looks similar to the,
Yeah, no, I didn't know
the
that.
original,
That's cool.
even though that was like the sheet linoleum. The other
Good
really
job.
cool thing, as bad as Reynolds was, it had original hardwood oak floors underneath all that layers of linoleum, and they were salvageable, and to my utter amazement. And so our flooring guy came in and salvaged them, and I can't wait to show you videos of that because I haven't even got to see them yet. I've pulled up some paper. You'll see it on one of these videos. But I'm going to fast forward this. This is the small little bedroom in the back. It's really tiny. It's about 70 square feet. It's enough to, you can fit a full bed in there. The closet's behind the door, but it's very tiny. And then going into the master, this is the hardwood floors, pulled back. Just a little teaser I've gotten to see of them. And man, they just look so good. But it's pretty incredible that they were salvageable. And then
Did you
this
know
was
they were there when you bought the house?
what's that?
Did you know
Mm-mm.
that they were there?
I had suspicion just because of the age of the house, but I had no idea. So this is the room that had the half bath in it, the really dark room that had the half bath over in the corner. And so we came in and got a vanity over to the right. Again, this is a small house. It's only about 1,100 square feet. And then a nice, big, beautiful, walk-in shower, and then your closet system right there.
This is a flip, right? I missed the beginning of this call, but you're
No, this is a
flipping.
rental. This is one of my rentals. So, Dan, you know me, like I make all of my rentals like really nice.
Yeah.
I don't typically flip things, but this is important though. Like I try not to skimp. If my budget allows for it, I try to make it flip quality, even if it's a rental property, because one day I may want to sell this. And the last thing I want to do is to come and spend a lot more money. Somebody peed in that toilet, by the way, Travis. I noticed. I was taking this video. Our water's not turned on. These are the fun construction things. I thought to myself, I was like, gosh, at least it's not a turd floating in there. But yeah, this is it. Like I don't have the before in front of me, but yeah, this is Reynolds. So
How
but
much are you gonna get? How much rent will you get for it?
I'm all right. So the numbers on this, I bought this for 110. With holding costs, closing costs, we're probably up to 125 to 130. We're spent about I'd say about 100 to 110 renovating it. Travis, where are we at on the budget? Do you know?
Most of taking everywhere around 96.
Okay, so we're probably 110 on the budget on this thing. ARV on it's probably 350 to 400, I would guess. So we're probably all in for like 250. But basically what we're doing is we're just refinancing it. And I am hoping to get about $2,400 a month rent for it. It's super close to downtown. You can get on your bicycle and ride downtown and be in downtown in 10 to 12 minutes. So for a SCAD students or even just some working service industry folks who are wanting to bunk up, like it could be a really good option. So, all right.
Hey, I gotta run really quick, but
Okay.
I'm interested to know more about those numbers in here. I
All right,
gotta
man.
put my daughter to bed.
All right. Thanks for joining, Dan.
I'll text you later. You gotta tell me some numbers here.
Okay. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to get this, this tool that Travis was using. Make sure I'll post that in the group so you guys have access to that. I'm going to do my best to update my vendor list, which is just, I've been lazy about. and hopefully, you know, have you guys have some solid people. And of course, you can always message me, right? Like I have that happen all the time. Like, hey, I need a flooring person, or I need a window person, or whatever it is. So we can always be a resource there. So any other questions? Travis, I really appreciate you, man, doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
Travis has been like drowning and just getting his real estate business off the ground, working a full-time job, taking care of 4 babies,
Moving.
moving. And so I just really want to thank you, man, for committing to doing this. So I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no problem.
So,
It's cool.
all right. Thank you all. Hopefully it was
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thanks.
Guys.
See ya.